today. All right, let's bring Rodney in for his weekly visit. And Rod, I know you're staying safe during the coronavirus, but you welcome some family in this weekend. I know you're excited to be hosting Brandon Avalos and his family from up in Iowa.
Yeah, it's been eventful. We got a lot of grandkids here, and it's just not been a very dull moment. I can tell you that for sure. But just like I said, Gary, just trying to stay in and stay close and stay healthy.
Indeed. Brandon Avalos, former Alabama baseball and football player, back visiting Rodney and bringing his family in. So hello to Brandon if he's out there listening. All right, let me just get right to it. We sit here on March 30th, so we've still got several months before football season, but Kirk Herbstreit stirred up a hornet's nest last week, Rod, as you know, when he said that he'd be shocked if we have a NFL, college, or high school football season. A lot of people feel like those comments were irresponsible based on the time frame. He's giving his opinion, but what did you make of them, and what do you think? Do you think we're going to have football in 2020?
Well, I kind of, I like Herbstreit. I think he does a tremendous job, and certainly a lot of respect I think everyone has for him. And that's why I think that his comments were ill-advised, because I thought at that time, nobody knows. Nobody knows what's going to happen. He's entitled to his opinion, first of all, and certainly can express it. I get that. But I just thought in his position, Gary, I really think when you don't know, the best thing to do is just to maybe say nothing or try to be as positive as possible, because right now there's a lot of fear among our people. So I think when you say something like that, when you're in his position, whether it was probably a really innocent comment on his part, just an innocent opinion, but it's at the same time, it really unsettles people, strikes fear in people. So from that perspective, I just thought that he would have been better advised not to say that.
Gotcha. On our television show, Tyler Insider TV, each Tuesday night, we've been spotlighting early enrollees. We'll do so again tomorrow night, and then we'll get to the other freshmen. It's a critical time for all these players, not just the freshmen, but for the returning players as well, at home, working on their own. But you think about the younger players who have not really even, and of course the other freshmen haven't even reported yet. This has got to be stressful for them and trying in regards to them trying to prepare themselves to play a college football season with the early enrollees now at home and these guys that we're expecting to arrive maybe this month or maybe in May or June, not knowing if they're going to even be able to arise. It's a real challenge, don't you think, Rodney, for these young players in particular, what's going on?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Gary, I think we need to look at it in the perspective of their people. They're young people. There's a lot of confusion. There's a lot of confusion everywhere right now with all of us, because we're all living in some uncertainty to some extent. And I think when you're a young kid like that, you have high expectations. You're certainly eager and enthusiastic about your future and the things that you're getting ready to do, the opportunities that you have, going to school, getting in the Alabama program, starting your career. That's all something that's very exciting, something that they're looking forward to. And now all of a sudden they have no idea exactly, what's going to transpire. With that said, I think probably when you look at most of these schools, and certainly Alabama, Nick Saban and this coaching staff, the strength conditioning people, I think they're staying in regular contact, being very positive with all of the players, especially the younger players and the early enrollees, and then the guys that will enroll later. So I think that's really important that they have that support from, people like Nick Saban, this coaching staff. That's something that I think is probably happening quite a bit. So, and they're staying on top of their workouts. We mentioned last week on the show that each player has his own regimen. I think the coaching staff is staying in touch with them to make sure that they follow that as closely as possible. And again, now it's probably limited for a lot of people just to be able to get out and do something. So I'd be curious, actually, for those who can't get out, Gary, what exactly do they do at this time?
Right. Yeah.
When you can't get to a weight room? That's something that would be really interesting to hear.
I agree. It's a strange set of circumstances for these football players and for everybody, but certainly for college football players trying to prepare for a season that right now, to some degree, is up in the air. Scott Moore and I are doing this feature every week now where we go down memory lane. We did 2008 last week. Today we did 1985. And not to recap what he and I just talked about, but that 1985 season was a fun season. I was shooting the Ray Perkins show, and just remember how close that team was. We talked about the two-point losses at Penn State and then in Birmingham the very next week to Tennessee, two really good teams. But, Ronnie, you'll remember that the game at LSU, I want to get your take on that one game because, of course, you had the great game against Auburn to finish, the great game against Georgia to open the season. But that tie against LSU ultimately cost Alabama a share of the SEC championship. Tennessee went 5-1. Florida was 5-1. They were not eligible. But Alabama was 4-1-1, as was LSU. You remember Perkins deciding to kick the point after Jelks, the trick play through to Shula to tie it at 14, or make it 14-13. And I remember the LSU fans booing when Perkins went for the extra point, and LSU should have won the game anyway. They missed a chip shot field goal there at the end. But that decision to kick, and I remember Perkins saying afterwards, whether it was still a minute and something to go, we could have got the ball back, or I didn't. And plus, I didn't want my team to lose if they fought so hard to come back after being outplayed really by LSU in that game. What did you think at the time of Perkins' decision? I remember I wanted to go for the win. I just thought that you go for the win in that situation, and Alabama played for the tie, and it wound up costing them a share of the SEC championship. Although Tennessee had beat Alabama head up, they probably would have went to the Sugar Bowl anyway. But what did you think of that decision?
Well, again, that's what is that, Gary?
35 years ago.
When you started bringing up that game, that's one of the plays I thought about. But this is where the confusion set in. I was thinking, it was like I couldn't remember exactly if Alabama went for two. I knew Jelks threw the ball. But anyway, looking back at it, it was listen, I understand. What they were coming off of the year before was such a disaster in 84. Of course, finishing, beating Auburn there 17-15. You don't think Dye wishes he would have kicked? Think about that one, Gary.
True.
That 1984 game.
Absolutely.
But coming off what they did the year before, then they had a great recruiting year. Humphrey, Jelks, Larry Rose, Derek Thomas, all of those guys. They were building some momentum that year. I don't blame him for that. I mean, I think you don't want to lose. You want to win. I get that. But at the same time, I certainly understand. Having to get your team in a position to tie and then possibly win the game. Back in those days in that situation, I understand that. So don't really have a hard time with that. I remember Alabama started out that game just dominating the game, and LSU fought back and you mentioned had taken the lead. But I remember the game well. And then of course the next year, you talk about disappointment.
Oh,
in '86, and when LSU came to Legion Field. And poor Bobby Humphrey, had a good game. And I remember one of the LSU defensive linemen. I can't remember if it was Carl Dunbar on that LSU team. It might have been Carl Dunbar. I can't remember. But one of their big name defensive linemen told me after the game. I was working in Jackson, Mississippi, and he was actually there the next couple of weeks later when they played Mississippi State. He told me, was talking about, hey, I feel sorry for Bobby Humphrey. This guy is a Heisman winner. He's that kind of player. And then he fumbles, twice going into the end zone?
Yeah, going into the end zone. Going in to win the game.
And lose. That was one of the games, that LSU game in 1986 was one of those. There hasn't been a lot of those, but that was one of those games that I just felt like, it was a horrible feeling because Alabama dominated the game and should have won the game. The best team did not win. Now, listen, there's been times that Alabama's pulled that. You remember when they went down to LSU in 1998 and Zal threw those tip balls that Quincy Jackson hauled in, and LSU was a much better team than Alabama that year. And Alabama eked out that win down there. So they've been a beneficiary of that too.
Yeah, that game in '86 though at Legion Field, you're right. That was the game. It's a quick little story, Rodney, and we'll have to wrap this up. But I was doing the Ray Perkins show as we talked about in '85 and '86, and I'd shoot the game, Rodney. I'd have to edit it overnight. When it was a night game, and we got back to Tuscaloosa, and I went right to the edit bay at WDBB, and I finished editing that show. Or wee hours in the morning. We were on videotape and having to go through and put it together, and then they would record it Sunday morning. Anyway, I left the station. I'd finished the show probably, 6 o'clock in the morning, something like that. And I think they were scheduled to tape maybe at 7:30, something like that. Well, anyway, you remember Dennis Holman was doing
right?
Yeah, was doing the show with Ray Perkins, and I remember he was at Krispy Kreme Donuts, the old location there on McFarland, and I was in there, and he was in there, and I said, "Hey, man," we were talking. I said, "Some games you just aren't meant to win," and I remember him using that line because it was a game Alabama should have won, but just didn't win. But anyway, all right, Rod. Final question: recruiting wise, what's going on, if anything? I mean, what are they able to do now with the situation being what it is?
Right now it's phone contact, text, Skype, that type of thing. They're staying in touch with prospects the best that they can, as much as they can. And, again, I think it's a valuable time in that regard. No on-campus visits. But I saw the NCAA. I don't know if you saw this last week. The NCAA put out a statement of some sort, basically saying that schools, these coaching staffs better be very careful. Apparently, they've caught wind that a few aren't abiding by the rule.
Oh boy!
I don't know if you saw that or not.
I didn't.
And I think they issued somewhat of a subtle threat that if teams or schools are caught, coaching staffs are caught, they would be punished, and should be, and you would expect them to be. But I was a little surprised to some extent, not completely, that at this time, that schools, anybody would violate that. Not having kids on campus or not making face-to-face contact in some way. But really, like I said, it's limited to the phone or Skype or texting, however you do it, and that's where we are right now, Gary. We talked about last week on your show about the process being pushed back, and again, I think that it's going to be real interesting eventually when this thing resumes to see. How the process how it unfolds, how it's not necessarily who gets who, but just how, the timing of it. So I think it's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, it is going to be. It's all unprecedented. All right, tell us about TiderInsider.com real quick, Rod.
Yeah, TiderInsider.com. It's only $48 a year, and people may say, why would I want to subscribe right now? Gary, if you're following this coronavirus, I'm telling you, there are thousands of messages posted on our quad every day. I just checked a little while ago. There was like 300 posted in the last hour. But it's doctors on there offering analysis information, and of course, certainly a lot of opinions and all of that. But it's a great way to keep up with it. Closures, whatever it might be. People have questions about various things that are going on right now. There's a lot of people there offering advice. So it's been amazing the way the quad has really stepped up and kind of carried the load. It's been a great source for many people.